Hey there, everybody. Dave Valente, the Thursday Night Hockey Show. Thank you for joining us tonight. Started a little bit early. I messed myself up. But anyway, great to have you watching tonight. Say hello to everybody on TikTok tonight. I can't see your questions. I'm sorry about that on TikTok, but I appreciate you watching us tonight. Uh, Lots to go through. It's one of the sad days of the calendar in the winter time, in that there are no hockey games tonight. So the NHL is now on its All Star break. So for the next few days, they'll have the All Star festivities tomorrow night, um, with the skills competition. So yeah, All Star break is February 2nd through the 5th. So tonight's the first night without hockey. 5th is the last night without hockey, and then games resume on the 6th. Now, also to note is that teams before and after the All Star break are doing the 5-day mandated break in the season. So whether it's before the All Star break or after the All Star break, teams get 5 days off either before or after. So if you notice that there are not as many games the last few days, that's why. And once we come back, starting the 6th through the 11th, again, we're going to have not as many games as we normally do during that time. But um, uh, tomorrow night is the skills competition. That's probably my favorite part of the All Star weekend. And then the All Star games are on February 4th. Now, remember with the NHL, the All Star game is 20-minute games of 5-on-5, or I'm sorry, 3-on-3 hockey. Um, and when you look at the All Star rosters, you can tell that defense isn't really at a premium here. So, in fact, one team only has, or most of the teams only have one defenseman listed on their rosters. So, but like I said, tomorrow night is the All Star Skills competition, and with that, there are some new games they're going to be doing this year, some innovations that they're doing this year, and then there's some of the tried and true ones that they're doing. So for this year, the new ones, there's a splash shot, and there are four teams of two players, uh, and they're required to hit targets in an attempt to dunk their opponents in a water tank. So I'm thinking kind of a mix between the accuracy skill shooting contest and a dunk tank. Um, then there is the pitch and puck. South Florida is very famous for its golfing, so they're incorporating golf into this. So it's a competition with both pucks and balls, and whoever gets it's a par four, I guess, and whoever can get there in the fewest strokes wins. I guess we'll see. And then they wanted to do an extra thing for the tenders tomorrow, so there's a tender tandem is what they're calling it. One goalie shoots pucks at a net from a certain distance, certain area on the ice, and they're graded on whether they go in the net and where they go in the net. So I guess if you hit top corner, you're going to get a much better score than if you just slide it on the ice. Um, then they're going to do a five-person shootout on the other goaltender from that conference, and it's five prominent women's players that'll be taking those shots for that 5-on-5 or the five-person shootout, and best combined score wins. Now, I'm saying wins, and I know that there's some money involved in the All-Star Skills competition, but to me, a lot of it, this is like, whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter. It's just they're there to have fun and entertain. Let's see. So the old school stuff that they're gonna have, of course, they're gonna have the fastest skater. We'll see if somebody can knock off Dylan Larkin. I think he's skating this year as well. Connor McDavid, Kirill Kaprizov. Oh, so the fastest skaters are going to be Dylan Larkin, Kirill Kaprizov, Kale McCarr, Chandler Stevenson, and Andrei Svechnikov. So that's going to be a pretty good race. The big one that everyone watches is the hardest shot competition, and that one is going to be it's going to be last, of course. Participants in that one, it's an interesting mix because this game doesn't have a whole lot of defensemen involved. So pretty much all the defensemen are involved, and Alexander Ovechkin. So Rasmus Dahlin, Seth Jones, Josh Morrissey, and Elias. Or I'm sorry, Elias Pettersson is also. So there's a couple of defensemen that are not participating, but Ovechkin and Pettersson for Vancouver are taking part in the hardest shot competition. Tage Thompson would have taken part in that because he's got a rocket, but he's injured, so Rasmus Dahlin is taking his place. Um, then there's the breakaway challenge. I think that's pretty much all the skaters, and then accuracy shooting. Let's see who's doing that. Oh, breakaway challenge actually is. It's the kind of the slam dunk version of a penalty shot. The goaltender is going to be Roberto Luongo, longtime goaltender of the Florida Panthers. Shooting on him will be Mitch Marner. Then Crosby and Ovechkin are teaming up for one. David Pasternak and Matthew Kachuk will be shooting. Yeah, like I said, points don't matter because all those guys are there's 2 Metro guys and 3 Atlantic Division guys. So there's nobody in the Pacific that's participating in this. Um, but there is a little bit of All-Star controversy. Of course, leading up to the All-Star game, once the rosters are announced, there usually is an injury or 2 that will necessitate a player being replaced. So, one of in the Atlantic Division, Tage Thompson was replaced by Rasmus Dahlin, and Alexander Barkov replaced um, um, Austin Matthews. In the Pacific Division, um, uh, the young phenom for the Seattle Kraken, Matty Beniers, was injured a couple nights ago against the against the Vancouver Canucks. So he's going to miss a couple weeks, and he'll miss the All Star game. Um, Now, Matty was the only representative for the Seattle Kraken, and the premise with the All-Star, at least the first part of the teams that were named, was that you have a representative from every team. So every team has a little skin in the game, I guess, to watch the game. Well, Matty Beniers was replaced by Chandler Stevenson of the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Vegas already has 2 players or they got the head coach of the team, and Logan Thompson is the goaltender for the team. I don't know. I think that you could have made the case for a guy like a Vince Dunn to skate for the Pacific All Stars. Um, uh, Stevenson's had a decent year, decent couple years, but nothing spectacular. Like I don't look at him as a surefire bona fide All Star. Um, but yeah, I'm not happy that if you're gonna make that a requirement at the beginning that, "Oh, we're gonna name 1 player per team, and then there must be a participant for every team." So you got teams that are really just mailing it in this season, like the Blackhawks, the Coyotes, the Montreal Canadiens, the Columbus Blue Jackets. We got players from those teams, but the team that is in first place of the Pacific Division doesn't have an all-star just boggles my mind. I don't understand that. I think it was a dumb move by the NHL to ignore Seattle, especially it's your newest franchise. You want to build bridges within the city to come and support the team. And by denying them to have an all-star in the game, maybe they don't watch. I mean, not everybody watches the All-Star game. It's kind of hokey and cheesy, and it's not the best hockey in the world. But everybody wants to. I mean, that's the reason why you have that rule that we pick a player per team, is so that everybody has some skin in the game and has a reason to watch. And I just think that it was a dumb move by the NHL to put Chandler Stevenson in there. Not that I'm saying that he's a horrible player. It's just that get Seattle a representative. Like just pick one. Like I said, Vince Dunn has had a great season. We'll talk about him in a little bit. Um, but anyway, let's just talk about the rosters again. The Atlantic Division is coached by Jim Montgomery, the Boston Bruins. Atlantic Division leading Boston Bruins. He has David Pastrnak from his roster, Linus Olmark from his roster, From Buffalo is Rasmus Dahlin, as I mentioned, with Tage Thompson being injured. Dylan Larkin from the Detroit Red Wings. Alexander Barkov coming in for Austin Matthews. Matthew Kachuk for the Florida Panthers. Nick Suzuki for the Montreal Canadiens. Brady Kachuk for the Ottawa Senators. Nikita Kucherov for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Andrei Vasilevsky for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then Mitch Marner for the Toronto Maple Leafs. In the Metro Division, head coach is Ron Brindamore, Metro Division leading Carolina Hurricanes. Svechnikov for the Hurricanes is the lone representative from that team. Johnny Gaudreau from the Columbus Blue Jackets. You got Jack Hughes from the New Jersey Devils. Brock Nelson from the Islanders. Ilya Sorokin from the Islanders, which is kind of funny to me. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. Adam Fox from the New York Rangers. Artemi Panarin from the New York Rangers, Igor Shesterkin from the New York Rangers for a fourth place team in the Metro. That's too many All Stars, but they most of those guys got voted on. Kevin Hayes from the Philadelphia Flyers, Sidney Crosby from the Penguins, and Alexander Ovechkin from the Capitals. In the Central Division, head coach Pete DeBoer, the division leading Dallas Stars. Clayton Keller from the Arizona Coyotes. Seth Jones from the Chicago Blackhawks. Nathan McKinnon from the Colorado Avalanche. Cale Makar from the Colorado Avalanche. Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche. Um, they're Stanley Cup champions, and even though they're floundering around, they're actually eighth place in the Western Conference right now. Um, all those guys deserve to go, so I'm not going to bitch too much about those guys being on the roster. Jason Robertson from the Dallas Stars, well deserved. Kirill Kaprizov from the Minnesota Wild. UC Saros, the backbone of the Nashville Predators. Vladimir Tarasenko from the St. Louis Blues. Big trade speculation around him. Connor Hellebuck from the Winnipeg Jets, and Josh Morrissey from the Winnipeg Jets. So two representatives from the Jets. Pacific Division head coach Bruce Cassidy of the Vegas Golden Knights. Probably why Chandler Stevenson was named to the roster, but um, I'll just leave it at that. Probably cements a little bit more rivalry between Vegas and Seattle, I think. But Troy Terry from the Anaheim Ducks, Nazem Kadri from the Calgary Flames, and then three representatives from the Oilers: Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, and Stuart Skinner, and Kevin Fiala from the Kings. Eric Carlson from the San Jose Sharks, Elias Pettersson from the Vancouver Canucks, Chandler Stevenson from the Vegas Golden Knights, and Logan Thompson from the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, there's one more player, and for some reason, Islanders have three players on the All-Star roster, although they're playing in two different divisions. So Bo Horvat, we'll talk about the trade here in a minute, was traded from the Vancouver Canucks to the New York Islanders after he was named to the All-Star. He's elected to the All-Star team. So that hey AJ, thank you for dropping by and saying hi. But Bo Horvat was traded from the Islanders from the Vancouver Canucks to the New York Islanders. There was question about whether he was going to continue to play for the Pacific Division All Stars. The NHL is approving it, but he's going to be wearing insignias for the Islanders during the All Star weekend, during the skills competition, and wear the fish sticks jersey for the Islanders, and even though he'll be in a Pacific Division jersey, he'll have the Islanders logo on that jersey. So, I mean, that's a thing. I mean, they could have said, Bo Horvat, you're no longer in the Pacific Division, so we're going to give your spot to a Seattle Kraken player. There were opportunities for the NHL to do the right thing with the Pacific Division, and they did not. So, all right, let us go to breaking news. Yeah, so again, watch the All Star game if you're so inclined. Watch the skills competition. I really like watching the skills competition from time to time. Uh, it can get a little bit hokey, but at least some of the traditional things like the hardest shot and some of the breakaway stuff is kind of fun. I'm interested to see the tandem one with the goalie shooting and the 5 female players shooting on the other goalie. That'll be an interesting one. But anyway, tomorrow night skills competition. Saturday at 3 o'clock is the All Star games starting with the Pacific and the Central, I think. But we'll see. Let's see. Andrew Brunette, New Jersey Devils associate coach. The Devils have been off for a few days, so he's already down in Florida, not coaching in the All Star game or anything. Remember, he was Florida Panthers coach last season as on an interim basis, replacing Joel Quenville after the Kyle Beach incident came to light. Um, so Andrew Brunette was down in Florida, and he was arrested on suspicion of DUI. He was driving a golf cart. Now, don't get me wrong, golf carts can hurt. I, I'm I wouldn't want to get hit by one, but better a golf cart than a several thousand-pound car. So, but still, he shouldn't have done it. Should have had a designated driver. It's simple to do. Um, let's see. For our the NHL announced its 3 stars of the month, and let me get the up here. Yeah, so 3 stars for January were Jack Hughes and the New Jersey Devils with 13 goals, 10 assists, 23 points in 13 games. David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins, 13 goals, 8 assists, 21 points in 14 games. And then Vince Dunn, the aforementioned Vince Dunn, who should have been All-Star, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points in 15 games, having a great season for the Seattle Kraken. And the rookie of the month was announced for January. It was Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, the man with so many double letters in his name. What is that? 4 sets of double letters? Yeah, 2 Ks, 2 U. Or I'm sorry, 3 sets of Ks and 2 Us. Awesome. He was 6-2-1 on the month with a 3.05 goals against average and a 9.907 save percentage. So, not outstanding numbers as far as goals against and save percentage. But for Buffalo, their defense is real suspect sometimes. So, he definitely deserved it. He really turned that team around this month. They had a tough struggle early in the month, and really got them through a really tough stretch of games. We had talked about this in previous weeks where Buffalo had 3 straight weeks where they would play Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. 3 straight weeks, which is a lot. I think they had like 17 games in 21 days. It was a tough schedule for Buffalo, and he helped guide them. They're only a point out of the playoffs at this point, so good on Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He's really taken the reins in Buffalo. I mean, remember they have Craig Anderson, who's 41 years old, and yeah, he's a great player. I'm not going to bag on Craig Anderson, but um, Eric Comrie, who's been injured and has struggled this season, he did get a win this last week against Winnipeg, a tough team, and you know, I I'm really happy to see Lukin really step up. It solidifies the goaltending situation in Buffalo, but they got to get him some help on the back end, and we'll get into that when we talk about the Sabres a little bit later. Uh, hey, Mister G. Gavin, how you doing? Appreciate the comment. If you have any questions or anything about the NHL, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll be happy to discuss them. Sad news from the world of hockey. A complicated legacy. Bobby Hull died. Legend of the Chicago Blackhawks. Um, was a couple-time MVP, 6-time goal scoring champion of the NHL. Nicknamed the Golden Jet. One of the first guys to move to the upstart WHA league and really kind of started the momentum of getting players better salaries. Um, he also had some controversies, especially after his career, where he, said that Hitler had a lot of good ideas, dumb stuff like that, and other, apparently beat up his wife. It was a very complicated legacy for Bobby Hull. I don't, uh, I can't mourn it. It's sad for the world of hockey and the legacy he left the world of hockey, but I think he tainted that legacy with his later actions. So, hey, Mr. Gavin, 142 subs, awesome. I'm at 115, I believe. Let's see. Yes, that was an awesome goal. So he's talking about the road trip that the Sabres went on in the middle of this hell schedule of January. They went 4-0 on the trip, or I'm sorry, they went 3-0 on the 3-1 on 3-0-1 on the trip. But first game was against Dallas. Dallas is leading the Western Division at this point, Western Conference at this point. And he scored. He got a really nice goal, and then the next 2 nights he scored. So first rookie defenseman with a 3-game goal streak in Sabres history. That dude's hopefully he's kind of getting to that point where he's going to start really contributing on the offense. So let's see. Trade news. So, 2 big trades that have happened, one bigger than the other, but on January 25th, we're hoping this kind of kicks off the whole trade stuff. But the Colorado Avalanche made a deal with the San Jose Sharks to send, let's see, who did they get? There was a couple of minor players from the Colorado Avalanche, Martin Kraut and Jacob McDonald, a forward and a defenseman. They sent them to San Jose in exchange for Matt Nieto, who had played for the Colorado Avalanche previously before signing with the Sharks, and Ryan Merkley, a defenseman for the San Jose Sharks. So, just a little bit of depth forward action for the Colorado Avalanche as they navigate a very difficult part of their schedule with the uh, with all the injuries they've had this year. Um, I saw Matt Nieto play the other night, and he looked good in Colorado, but it's not hard to look good in Colorado. So the that is just prelude to the trade we talked about a little bit earlier, which is the big one. Um, yeah, I will talk about Tage. That's it's worrying what happened last night, but uh, the big one that happened on the 30th, the Islanders acquire Bo Horvat from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for forward Anthony Beauvillier, who's very serviceable forward, and a prospect named Atu Rati. Finish one of really fantastic finish forward. A lot of people saying that Vancouver really won this trade, especially if Horvat does not sign on the island, just on Ratty alone. So, um, yeah, so that's the biggest chip to fall, and that was one of the biggest chips that we were looking at was where does Bo Horvat go? And so Bo went to the Islanders. There's some salty folks out there, but their teams didn't go after him. And we'll talk about trades and stuff here in a minute with the Atlantic Division preview. Let's see injury report. Talk about Tage Thompson. Here we go. So Tage Thompson is nursing an upper body injury. It looked to be a lower back injury on the bench. They were kind of massaging it out towards the end of the second period last night, and in the 5-1 loss by Buffalo to Carolina. Um, Back injuries are so awful. It looks more muscular than it does structural. I mean, structural one is bad. We as Sabres fans, we know with Jack Eichel, you know anything involving the spine, whether it's the neck or all the way down to the lumbars, you got to be careful with that stuff. So he was held out of the third period last night. Not sure what's going on. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what happened. There was talk prior to the game that Tage Thompson was nursing an upper body injury, um, and that he was game time decision. He decided to play that game. It's a big game. If Buffalo had won that game, they would have moved into a playoff position going into the All Star break, which I don't think a lot of people would have predicted going into the season. Um, I don't know if the back injury was the injury that they were talking about going into that game, but he definitely tweaked something. Um, when he drew the penalty in the end of the near the end of the second period, where the stick got caught around his waist, he looked like he got tweaked there, and he didn't really play well after that. So we'll see what happens with Tage Thompson. I'm hoping it's just a muscular injury, and the time that they have off now between and him not going to the All Star game. So he's going to be off from last night until February 11th is going to be enough time to heal up the muscular injury and get him some time to rest. But hopefully, it's nothing more than muscular, and that it does give him a chance to rest that injury. Other injuries: Austin Matthews, another All Star, is out 3 weeks, and will miss that All Star game with the knee sprain that he suffered on the 25th against the Rangers in the 3-2 win in overtime. Did play the entire game, but tweaked something in a hit to the boards, I think, and is out for 3 weeks. So we'll see how the Maple Leafs uh, do without him. They did suffer a loss last night to Boston, which is no surprise, 5-2. But I don't know that Austin Matthews in that game would have helped them at all. So Mark Stone is out indefinitely for the Vegas Golden Knights. Once again, the whole Vegas Golden Knights injury issues are starting to rear their ugly head. Jack Eichel's missed some time this year. Um, uh, and he has not looked good since he's come back. And Mark Stone now is out. He had back surgery. He's expected to make a full recovery. Again, it's one of those back injuries, but there's no timetable on the recovery, so I don't know if he's coming back this season. Um, they're the Vegas Golden Knights, who are from the beginning of the season leading the Pacific Division, have slipped all the way to third, and they're only 5 points above the playoff cut line. So, the much has been made with Buffalo or with Jack Eichel never playing in the playoffs. This year, it seemed like, oh man, he's going to finally get his chance, and he's gonna have to really, really step up for the Vegas Golden Knights, to get them over the line into the playoffs. Um, they're still in a good way. As long as they stay at least in the top 3, that guarantees that they'll be in the playoffs. They drop down to 4th, it's a crapshoot because that Western Conference is so tight from 1st place in the entire conference to, completely out of the playoffs is like 12 points. So it's a rat race there in the Western Conference, and he definitely has to. Oh, so play for the Dallas Stars Elite in 2013. So I guess that's your birth year, 2013 birth year, and you're going to Cleveland. Excellent, man. Well, good luck in your tournament there. That is awesome. All right, take care, Gavin. I really appreciate you dropping in the show. We're here every Thursday night, so drop on by next time. But let's talk about so Mark Stone, they're 5 points out of the ahead of the 8th and final playoff spot. They've got work to do. Um, and they don't have a whole lot of cap space. Now, Mark Stone being on long-term injured reserve does give them some more cap space, but they don't have a whole lot. And when we a couple weeks from now, when we talk about the Pacific Division and their push towards the trade deadline, we'll go over what Vegas has in terms of cap space. Let's see. Gustav Nyquist for the Columbus Blue Jackets is likely out for the rest of the season with a shoulder injury. He was injured and hit by Jesse Puljujärvi, which kind of surprises me with Jesse Puljujärvi. But he took a hit from Jesse Puljujärvi, injured his shoulder on January 25th, and he's I think they're gonna have surgery. So that might be the last game for Nyquist as a Columbus Blue Jacket, as the 33-year-old is a unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. Whether he picks up with another team next season or goes to Europe, no clue at this point. Zach McEwen is out 5 weeks for the Flyers. He has a fractured jaw that was suffered in overtime against Minnesota on the 26th. So that's another blow to the Philadelphia Flyers as they try and kind of creep themselves back into that playoff race in the the Metropolitan. And McEwen's out. Ilya Mikheyev has been shut down for the season by the Vancouver Canucks. Not a surprise here. He had partially torn his ACL in the preseason and had been playing with it. And if Vancouver was in a playoff position, I think he'd still be out there playing. But get it fixed now. He can be back in time for the start of the training camp and have a good season. Um, And then, let's see, a couple more injuries. Shane Gostisbehere is out 4 to 6 weeks for the Coyotes. Upper body injury suffered in a game against Anaheim on the 24th and also on the 24th. Alexander Carrier of the Nashville Predators was injured against Winnipeg. He also is out 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body injury. So that is the injury report. One more piece of news that I didn't get to because we didn't have a show last week because I had injured my knee um, uh, before the show last week. But Bruce Boudreau was let go by the Vancouver Canucks. Very sad. Uh, Bruce Boudreau is one of the class guys of the NHL, one of the better coaches out there. I don't think it's the end of the road for Bruce Boudreau. Um, his final game behind the bench, the fans were rallying for him, saying, "Bruce, there it is." Every time something good would happen for the Canucks, and y- you know, I get it. Rick Tocchet is now the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and we'll see if he gets the full time job after the season. I would assume so. There really isn't anything that he can do this season to improve their fortune, just to get them playing better hockey as they go into the off season. So let's go to crime and punishment. Yeah, so not too much today or this week, or the last couple weeks actually. The only thing that has happened is that Coyotes defenseman Yuso Valimaki was fined the maximum $4,189.19. That's important, 19 cents for a slash on Max Jones of Anaheim. So yeah, that goes on his record. If he does something dumb, that might result in some enhanced discipline. But yeah, that's the only disciplinary issue that we've seen this year. So, all right, let's talk about the trade deadline. So let's preview the Atlantic Division this week. Um, talk about who are buyers, who are those tweener teams that could go either way, and who is selling at the cap. And we'll talk about the at the trade deadline and talk about their cap space and what they need. So let's talk about the buyers in the Atlantic Division. There are quite a few going into the trade deadline. Uh, First off, Boston, they've got $2.278 million uh, of cap space left. Now, keep in mind, this is cap space. It continues to grow towards the end of the season as teams will be able to take on larger contracts because they're prorated. It's not going to grow significantly for Boston, but there's just a little bit of tweaking that Boston needs to do. They're not. I wouldn't, do like a massive big name coming into Boston to mess with that chemistry at this point. What they just need to do is tinker with the depth, get some depth defensemen for a playoff run, so that if you get injuries, you're not throwing out some rookies, some undeveloped prospects, and that's pretty much it for Boston. Boston, I mean, you can't argue with what they've done this season. So for Toronto, they've got 2.725 million in cap space. Not a whole lot of tinkering room there for them as well. Um, they've had more injury concerns going forward. They're not going to be able to do anything long term. Like you're not going to put Austin Matthews on long term IR to be able to hold down the fort. You're going to have to bring Austin Matthews back, especially with the short term injury. So they're going to have to address some depth, bottom six forwards, and then playoff performer. One guy comes to mind, and I would hate to see it. Brian O'Reilly is out there on the trade block. I don't know that the Leafs can swing that deal. They probably have to bring in another team to kind of take some of the cap money off of the table there. But yeah, if I'm the Kyle Dubas and looking at adding to Toronto, it's a playoff performer. That's what you need. Let's see. For Tampa, Tampa needs cap space. Like they've got about a ham sandwich worth of cap space right now, like 719,967. That's bare. That's not even the rookie minimum. So not much Tampa can do. Although they've been known to massage that cap, um, do some 2 and 3 team trades to take away cap hits. The David Savard deal a couple of years ago comes to mind, where they're able to move him from Columbus to Detroit to Tampa, and Columbus and Detroit eat some of that cap space, so they were able to fit him in. But as close as they are to the cap, it's going to have to they're going to have to move some money out to get some money back in. Um, uh, I don't know. I just Tampa amazes me every year. So we'll see what they do at the trade deadline. They need something. I don't know. I mean, they're kind of stuck between Buffalo and Toronto. Toronto's It looks like Toronto's going to have home ice advantage in a first round playoff matchup against Tampa again. But we saw how last year went with Tampa. So um, Buffalo. Look at that cap space, man. $47 million of cap space. Oh, I forgot a number on the end of that. But yeah, $47 million in cap space. The most in the league going into the trade deadline. And we'll talk when we get to the Sabres beat about what really should be going on with Buffalo. But what Buffalo needs right now is sandpaper. You watch that game against Carolina, and they wilted in the first part of that game. It was over after one. They did have a nice fight back. They had a really good second period, a pretty decent third period, although towards the end, Carolina had a couple of had a sloppy goal in front, and then an empty netter. Um, but they need sandpaper in that forward core. Someone that's gonna really not take any crap. I'd like to see a guy that, and I know this is kind of blasphemous for a Sabres fan to consider this, but Max Domi. He's out there available, and he wouldn't take a huge chunk off the cap. I know a lot of Sabres fans will say, "Well, we need that cap space to, for guys like Cousins and Darlene and the like down the line." Thing is, with $47 million, you can do a lot just this year to augment that team. Um, And then Florida, $2.387 million in cap space, but that a lot of that is in long-term IR. And they're getting guys back before the playoffs. So um, what they need is cap space. They have overspent, and they just don't spend well. And getting a return for what they're spending on is has been lacking for Florida, as they find themselves in fifth place in the Atlantic Division going into the All Star break. Very disappointing for Florida. My tweeners. There's only a couple, and I think they're both going to be sellers at the trade deadline. First off is Detroit. They got $16 million, almost $17 million in cap space. Plenty of cap space going in there to make a splash if they wanted to. But they've got one thing that they really need to do this season at the trade deadline, and that is find a new home for Larkin and get some assets back for him. I think it's been pretty clear that Larkin won't sign in Detroit. It's his first shot at a big time free agent contract. So, um, he's going to be a good rental for a team. And what can Detroit get back for Dylan Larkin? The other one is Ottawa. Again, both Detroit and Ottawa are kind of flipping back and forth, and neither are like miles out of the race at this point. They're only a few. They're a 3-game winning streak from being kind of in that race again. But Ottawa's had too many injuries this year. So what Ottawa needs this season is to prepare for next season. Get maybe a developing prospect, one that's not just drafted, maybe somebody that's playing in the AHL that just doesn't have room at the NHL level. in exchange for a roster player, move some cap space. They do have a ton of cap space, or they have a decent amount of cap space at $11 million. Um, but yeah, prepare for next season. Get healthy. I think that's a big thing for Ottawa. Losing some players long term this season has really hampered them, especially like Josh Norris has really hampered them this year. And then finally, my sellers for the Atlantic. It's just at Montreal official sellers. Like they just got to start moving stuff. And for Montreal, you got to shed salary. I mean, you can't be $6 million from the cap at this point in the season and be in the tank battle. You make a decision. You've got some good players. Are they part of the future? And if they are, then you can invest in them. But there are guys in that roster that you could move right now if they're healthy. I mean, that's one of the things they've had issues with health. But if you can keep them healthy, can you move them at the roster or at the deadline to get prospects and picks? Just keep stacking prospects and picks, shed some salary, put yourself in a better position, not for probably not for next year, but for 2 years from now. They can go make a splash on the open market. Anyway, that is my preview for the Atlantic Division. Um, it's a very tough division because you've got so many teams that are still technically in it. There's only one team that's really out of the race, and even if they went on a 5-game run, they could kind of sort of say that they're in the race. Um, it's just too many injuries for the Montreal Canadiens. Um, so only one solid seller in the division. Again, that's probably what's kept a lot of the deals from happening is that too many teams are still kind of in that tweener stage, and are you going to be able to make that step up and make that run? Do you have enough time? Are you going to be able to vault enough teams to be able to get back into the playoffs? All right, let's end the week. We're not going to do hot not players and teams of the week because of the All Star game. We'll just go right into the Sabers beat tonight. The team needs to rest. We talked about their schedule, the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 3-week gauntlet that they just went through. They did pretty well. I think they were close to 500, maybe a little bit above 500, but they finished fairly strong until last night. Last night was a pretty disappointing game, but again, they need to rest up. Hopefully, Tage Thompson is healthy enough to keep going for Buffalo, and after the All Star break and kind of regain a little bit more of that form that he had earlier in the season. Um, but while they need to rest, Kevin Adams really needs to start getting active. And I pointed out earlier that they've got $47 million in cap space in Buffalo, and right now is the time to strike for Buffalo. Um, One, you want to get a player on your roster soon enough to make a difference, to really integrate with the team, develop some chemistry with some of the players. If you wait until March 3rd, you only have about a month left in the season, month and a week left in the season to really integrate and get on the same page with the team. Um, what also waiting till the trade deadline to make moves does is it deals a lot of teams back into the conversation. Right now, with the $47 million, you could go after a high priced free agent like an Eric Carlson. Eric Carlson's probably a bad because he's got more term on his contract, but you could realistically go off for Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves or both with 47 million. They're both expiring contracts. I know there will be pressure to re-sign Patrick Kane, but you could get both of those guys on that team and you know really solidify that roster. And you can do that now, whereas teams like Boston or New York, either New York team now, um, would have to wait a little while until or make do some real uh, cooking of the books to get those players under, like a 2 or 3 team or sorry, 3 or 4 team trade so that each of those teams can take a bit of their salary, retain salary, um, to be able to make it work now. And so The longer that the Sabres wait, the less chance that they're gonna be able to strike and get some of these players that they really want. The players that could really help the team. And I know that, the Sabres have always said that they're right now in the process of rebuilding, but you're 1 point out of the playoffs in February, which I can't they weren't even 1 point out of the playoffs when the season started in January a couple of years ago. They I can't remember the last time the Sabres have been this competitive this late in the season. It had to been 2012, last or 2011, last time they were this competitive. And I don't think you can waste that. I don't think you can waste an opportunity. And it's not like the Sabres have to do anything like drastic. You don't have to bring in Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves. Taves, I think, would be good because of the faceoffs. Um, which is definitely a need. But you could bring in a Max Domi, the guy that has sandpaper that can, bang, and get a good depth defenseman that will make people fear skating in their zone. Um, Make people pay the price to make those plays to get a goal. Um, that's really all that Buffalo needs at this point to get into the playoffs. Now, I will say they get into the playoffs. Success, everything that happens after that is gravy. They're at least a year ahead of schedule, based off of what happened with the whole Jack Eichel thing. We thought this was a three-year rebuild. Um, so at year 2, this is great progress, but you can do it. You can make it into the playoffs. Um, your competition right now really is the Metro Division teams like the Rangers, Islanders, Pens, and Capitals. You got to move past those guys to really solidify your standing. But yeah, the sky's the limit for Buffalo, and Kevin Adams needs to get going to be able to make those moves to get Buffalo over the hump. And no better time to start than All Star Weekend. All the teams are there. Uh, you know, Higher ups from the teams are there. Make a deal. Well, throw even the smallest deal, throwing a bone to the Sabres fans saying, "Hey, we're gonna be active this year." Even if everything falls throughout the rest of the it's just that hint that we're gonna bring in some help to try and get into the playoffs. Um, and yeah, so Kevin Adams needs to take what happened last night, watch that game, watch that tape, see what Buffalo really needs because it seems when they play teams that play heavy hockey, they do have a lot more problems. And if they can get a couple players that play that heavy game and kind of push back on teams like that, the sky's the limit for the Sabres. Anyway, that is it for the show tonight. Next week, we're going to feature the Central Division on the trade deadline. We'll talk about what happened in the All Star game. Um, we'll have a ton of games to talk about because, again, half the league is going to be on their 5-day break with all games, all teams back in action by February 11th. So thanks for tuning in. We will talk to you all next week and have a great, great night.